My name is Sarafina Vale, and I am 26 years old. On the night of my first wedding anniversary, my father-in-law stood before hundreds of guests and tore me apart with his words, calling me worthless, claiming I had no roots, no value, and that I had destroyed his son's future. My husband watched every second of it and never said a word in my defense. When I finally found the courage to speak up for myself, my husband raised his hand and slapped me in front of everyone. The laughter that followed was deafening. I stood there, wiped the single tear from my cheek, pulled out my phone, and made one quiet call. "Dad," I said, "please come." And when he walked through those doors, every single person in that room lost the color in their face. But before I take you to that moment, let me take you back to where it all began. The hall that night was stunning. Soft golden lighting wrapped around everything. Music floated through the air, and the sound of laughter and conversation filled every corner. It looked like a dream, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was genuinely smiling. I stood holding a glass, watching the room around me. My husband, Salem, was making his rounds, charming everyone he spoke to, while his parents greeted guests with warmth and open arms. There were no cold glances thrown my way, no hushed comments, no uncomfortable silences, and in that stillness, I let myself believe something I had been waiting a long time to believe. Maybe they had finally accepted me. That thought alone made me feel like I could breathe again, because things had not always been this way, not even close. I had met Salem 2 years earlier at the office where we both worked. Nothing dramatic, nothing out of the ordinary, just an ordinary weekday. I was new, kept to myself, focused entirely on doing my job well. Salem was the opposite in every way, full of confidence, always laughing, always surrounded by people who wanted to be near him. One afternoon, he walked over to my desk, smiled, and said something simple. That was all it took. Everything shifted from that day forward. Our conversations started small, quick exchanges between tasks, then grew into something longer. Coffee breaks became lunches, lunches became long evenings working side by side, and somewhere in all of it, I stopped feeling alone. With Salem, there was no pressure to be anything other than myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely seen. Perhaps that is why I made the choice that I did. One evening, as we sat together, he asked about my family. I paused for just a moment before saying, "I don't really have anyone. My parents are gone. I've been on my own for years." The words were not true, but I said them because I wanted something pure. I did not want him to look at me through the lens of money or status or expectation. I just wanted him to fall in love with me, the person sitting in front of him. And he did. He never questioned what I said. Instead, his expression softened, and from that point on, he loved me with even more tenderness. He was everything I had hoped a partner could be: kind, steady, present, and when he asked me to marry him, I said yes without a single hesitation. Our marriage, however, was never smooth. From the very beginning, his family made their position clear. They had wanted him to marry someone who came from wealth, someone whose name carried influence, and whose connections could benefit the family. In their eyes, I was simply not that person. In the early days, they kept their opinions quiet, communicating their disapproval through cold silences and distant expressions. But once we were married, the mask came off entirely. It started with small digs disguised as jokes, comments about how little I had brought into the marriage, remarks about simple girls with simple lives. I smiled through each one, telling myself it would fade with time, that eventually they would see me for who I was. But time only made things worse. Salem's father was the harshest of all and made no effort to hide it. Day after day, he reminded me that I had ruined his son's life, that I had brought nothing of worth into their home, that I was useless. Those words became a rhythm I could not escape, and the worst part was Salem's silence. At first, he simply stood by without joining in, and I held on to that. I told myself he was avoiding conflict, that one day he would find his voice and stand beside me. But slowly, without me even noticing when it happened, he began to change. He started laughing at comments that used to make him uncomfortable. He began ignoring the pain written across my face. And then one evening he said casually, "Maybe they're right." That single sentence cracked something deep inside me that never fully healed. Still, I stayed. I loved him. I believed the man I had married was still somewhere underneath all of it. So when Salem told me about the anniversary celebration he was planning, something inside me stirred with hope again. A grand event, hundreds of guests, the whole thing carefully put together. He seemed genuinely excited, and his parents were warm with me in the days leading up to it. They spoke to me like I belonged, like I was part of the family, and I allowed myself to feel it. Standing in that glowing hall on the night of the party, surrounded by smiling faces and beautiful arrangements, I thought maybe everything I had quietly endured was finally behind me. Maybe this was the turning point I had been waiting for. But there was a small, quiet feeling I could not shake. Something underneath the surface that refused to settle. I looked at Salem and he smiled at me, but the smile felt slightly off. And then his father stood up, raised his glass, and the room gradually fell quiet. 1 year of this marriage, he announced with a grin. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd, and I forced a smile. He continued speaking, saying the night was special for their family, and then his eyes landed on me. He said it was also the perfect moment to speak honestly. My grip on my glass tightened. He looked me in the eyes and said without flinching that his son had made the greatest mistake of his life. He pointed at me, and that mistake was standing right there in the room. The murmurs spread instantly. I turned to Salem, waiting for him to say something, anything. He said nothing. His father kept going, saying he had welcomed me, hoping I would add something meaningful to their lives, but that I had brought absolutely nothing. He spoke about my lack of family, my lack of background, my lack of worth. With each sentence, the laughter in the room grew louder and more comfortable, as though watching someone be humiliated was entertainment. I could not stay quiet any longer. I stepped forward and told him steadily that he did not have the right to speak to me that way. My voice was calm. The room went still, and then I heard the sharp sound before I felt it. A slap. My head turned with the impact, and when I looked back, it was Salem standing before me, his hands still raised, his face unrecognizable. He told me not to dare disrespect his father. He said he was done. He said he deserved better. That word, better, the same word his family had used against me from the very beginning. And in that moment, everything became completely clear. The warmth they had shown me recently, the smiles, the inclusion, none of it had been real. This entire evening had been designed as a public humiliation, a performance meant to destroy me in front of 600 witnesses. Laughter filled the room again, louder this time. People whispered and watched. My face burned and my ears rang, but I did not cry. Not there. Not in front of any of them. I stood still, breathed slowly, and then reached for my phone. My hands were not shaking. I found the number I needed and pressed call. It rang twice before he answered. I closed my eyes for just a second. "Dad," I said quietly. A brief silence followed, and then his voice came through, calm and familiar. "What happened?" I opened my eyes and looked around the room one more time before saying the only 2 words I needed to say. "Please come." He did not hesitate. "I'll be there," he said, and the call ended. My father-in-law laughed when he saw me lower the phone. He mocked me, asking who I had possibly called when I had told everyone I had no one. More laughter followed. I did not answer. I simply stood in place and waited, completely still while the room carried on around me, music and voices and amusement, as if nothing of any consequence had happened. Then the doors opened. The sound cut through the noise in a way that made every head turn. The music seemed to fade on its own. A man walked in, not rushing, not hesitating, but carrying with him a presence that changed the atmosphere of the entire room the moment he entered. He wasn't smiling. His eyes moved across the space until they found me, and once they did, he walked toward me without pausing once. When he stopped in front of me, I said softly, "Dad." The word traveled across the silence. My husband looked like he had stopped breathing. "That's not possible," he whispered. His father, still confused, asked who the man was with something close to amusement in his voice. Salem's answer came in fragments. He said the man was the owner of Ardent Wear, the largest clothing brand in the industry, the very company where Salem himself worked. The gasps came in waves. My father-in-law's expression collapsed. Salem looked between us, his voice trembling as he asked why I was calling this man Dad. My father let the question hang in the air for a moment before answering in a voice that was low and completely controlled. "Because she is my daughter." The room erupted. My father did not look at them. He looked at me, and then his eyes moved to my cheek where the mark from Salem's hand was still visible. Something in him shifted. His jaw tightened. His hands closed into fists at his sides. When he asked who had done it, the room went utterly silent. Not a single person answered. My father-in-law attempted to explain it away as a misunderstanding, and my father stopped him with a single word. One word, and the man went quiet. My father looked at them both with eyes that held nothing warm. Then he told them that the company they worked for, the one built into an empire, was registered in my name. Salem looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. He said I had never told him. My father replied simply that I had not, because I had wanted him to choose me. Not my inheritance, not my name, not what came with it, just me. He even told them that I had asked him, my own father, to pretend he did not know me, so that whatever Salem chose would be chosen freely and honestly. Salem looked at me then, and his eyes were not angry. They were shattered. He said he had not known, that he was sorry, that he had not understood. My father stepped closer to him and said, "You didn't know." Then after a pause, he added that he had warned me, that he had told me this man would one day show me exactly who he was. The tears that came to my eyes were not from heartbreak alone. They were from finally understanding what my father had seen all along. He turned back to my in-laws and told them quietly, with no trace of emotion, that they would answer for what they had done. Then he looked at Salem and said that by morning he expected 2 things on his desk: a resignation letter and divorce papers. Salem rushed forward, apologizing, begging, his voice cracking apart. I raised my hand gently and stopped him. "No," I said. My voice did not waver. "You showed me tonight exactly who you are." I looked around the room at all the faces that had laughed at my expense just minutes before. "I gave you a year," I said, "a full year to see me for who I am." No one spoke. You failed. I picked up my bag. My father stood beside me, solid and steady. I looked at Salem one final time, the man who had struck me in front of everyone he knew. I said that he would never have lifted a hand to me had he known who I truly was. His eyes fell to the floor because he knew every word of it was the truth. I turned and began walking toward the door. The room stayed silent the whole way. No laughter, no whispers, only the weight of what they had done and the regret that had replaced it. Just before I stepped out, I stopped. I did not turn around. I said the last thing I had to say. You didn't lose me tonight. You lost the only person who ever truly chose you. And then I walked out without looking back, because I was not broken. I was finally, completely done.